All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for our October 1st music census session on licensing and sync rights. Really excited about today's session. I'm certainly going to learn a lot. I hope that everyone here does as well. We have some really great panelists. Really quickly, before we get into it with these folks, just want to give a real quick plug to this series. The Music Census sessions are a series, professional development series created by the New Orleans Office of Nighttime Economy and the Ella Project, also usually in partnership with the public libraries. We decided to do this block virtual so we could pull in some expertise from outside of New Orleans. So today we have New York City present here to share some wisdom. Um, for those of you that aren't familiar with our office, the Office of Nighttime Economy is a very small team in the mayor's office. We work on a bunch of different things, partially, music industry development, looking at what we can do to support the entire music ecosystem here. We also just work on general business resources. We have a free mediation service for businesses and neighbors when there are disputes, things like that. You can find out a ton more about what we do at nola.gov/night. Also wanted to quickly plug that we have NOLA MusicCon coming up later this month. I'm not responsible for any of that planning. That's, their own team, which they do an amazing job. I'll be speaking on a couple different sessions. The dates for MusicCon are October 28th through 30th. Programming is looking really good this year, so I hope to see some of y'all there. So yeah, let's get into it. For those of you that don't know me personally, my name is Ashlye Keaton. I'm the Policy and Outreach Manager in the Office of Nighttime Economy. I've been in this job for about 2 years, but before that, my work was entirely in live music and festival operations and stuff like that. So that is my background. Like I said, I'm excited to learn more about this topic today. So yeah, let's let's hand it over to the panelists to introduce yourselves. Lou, do you want to say hi really quick? Most people here probably know who you are, but I'll let you do your spiel.
Hey, what's going on? Can you guys hear me fine?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Blue Hill with the band Waterseed in Moonrise Entertainment. New Orleans native. Lived in New Orleans most of my adult life, but I've lived in a few other cities as well. All the time, full-time musician, working pretty hard. My background is outside of being an artist and performer, is music marketing and music management. So I'm happy to be here to have this great conversation.
Awesome. Blake, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, my name's Blake Leyh. I'm a composer, music supervisor, sound designer, music producer. I've been doing stuff with music and film and TV since a long time ago, for like 45 years or something. So I was the music supervisor on the HBO show Treme and spent 4 years in New Orleans, kind of embedded in the music community there, and was it was one of the great things I ever worked on in my life, particularly because I had a chance to support the New Orleans music community and get a lot of people paid for, it was very gratifying to spend some years taking money from a major American entertainment conglomerate and putting that money in the pockets of New Orleans musicians. So, which was one of the really the main motivating forces for even making that show in the first place. So that's my connection. Although I spent time in New Orleans, and my mother and my sister lived in New Orleans, I also knew the music scene in the city before we ever did that show. But that's what's up.
Ashlye.
Hi, I'm Ashlye Keaton. I'm co-founder of the Ella Project, of course, but I've been a practicing attorney for about 21 years now. And first of all, I want to thank Blake because I do remember when he was here, and we spent a lot of time trying to identify the folks who really needed the income from the sync licenses, and I know that Blake and some of the other producers worked very hard to ensure that New Orleans artists were paid at such a critical juncture post Katrina. So thank you for that. I have done a lot of sync licensing over the past couple of decades, and beyond the work I've done with through the Ella Project and in my private practice, I do represent a 22,000 title music catalog that I often license music for film, television, a lot of advertisements. So I think that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Blake, let's pass it back to you really quick. So you wear a lot of different hats. Let's talk a little bit, I guess, about your music supervisor role really quickly. What are kind of your core responsibilities? What are your challenges that you face? What do your day-to-days look like? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, being a music supervisor, it's one of those titles like producer. It can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different situations. Sometimes the person who gets the credit as the music supervisor is like the producer's boyfriend who says, try some Miles Davis in that scene, and they end up with the credit of music supervisor. On Treme, I was involved with all of the music, every aspect of the music from the beginning to the end. So working with the writers and the producers on the scripts, suggesting plot lines, how can we work in some bounce music in season 2? What if we had a character who was doing this? So everything from conceiving of the stuff to then figuring out technically how we were going to capture the live music, which was a big job, a big technical job on that show. And then I also was the music editor and the music mixer. So everything from very beginning to the very end of the whole show, I was involved with that. But it depends a lot on the nature of the project. So I started out as a music supervisor working with David Simon on his show, The Wire. And on that show, there was no live music aspect to it. So that was a very different thing. And then after Treme, I went on to a show, which I'm not even a big fan of actually, it's called Bosch, which Eric Overmyer went from Treme onto that and asked me to be involved, and so I was. But that was really just sitting in a room in New York and coming up with some jazz to suggest to them, oh, why don't you try some Art Pepper? So it was, so you know, the work can vary tremendously from project to project, and whether or not you do clearance is a big part of the job. For me, I'm mostly interested in the creative side. I hate doing music clearance. I actually hate the music business and every aspect of the business, and I'm also not very good at it. So on a job like Bosch, where I had to pick the music and then also do the clearance work, figure out the rights and make the calls and negotiate the contracts, I was doing that. And that is more typical in what most music supervisors do both sides, the creative and the business side. But I've been lucky enough to, on David Simon's thing, have someone else to do clearance.
Awesome. I bet there are a ton of crazy stories you could tell about your journeys through music supervision in New Orleans. Lou, passing it back to you really quick. You are one of the busiest people I think I know in New Orleans. I think y'all were just out on the West Coast on tour. You're always doing stuff around town here. You're all over the place. How and when did you first start incorporating licensing and sync into part of your revenue model? And how has that kind of evolved over time?
For us, it was something that we always wanted to do. My first opportunity to place was actually on a New Orleans show, which was called what is it? It's the HG show that where they were developing properties or real estate properties. I'll think of it in a second. But and it was basically, I got a call from a friend in New York who's a New Orleans native, goes by the name Basie Bob. He hit me like, Lou, I need brass band music for this show. It's called The Deed. That's the name of the show that used to be on, The Deed. He's like, I need brass band music. Can you get me like 6 brass band songs in like 48 hours? And I was in New Orleans. I had moved back to New Orleans, and it's like, sure. And called some friends and we recorded it. And you know, next thing you know, we're on the show getting paid. That relationship was more of a conglomerate. where you would join like as a writer, and then there would be like assignments that would come out, and they'd be like 50 producers and writers and composers, and they would all vie for the same, placement. I had a huge advantage because I played in brass bands. I grew up in New Orleans, so I knew how to get the feel and the sound that the show was looking for. So it worked out for me. The second opportunity was just people, reaching out to me, like with similar situations, and like Disney would call and say, "Hey, we need a theme for this TV show, and could you do something?" It's always super fast turnaround, like 48 hours. Can you get us something in 48 hours? Can you, let us know what you're working with? So that was more direct to producers, to the music supervisors, whereas the first situation was not. It was just like, this company is going to submit 50, titles. Hopefully yours get picked. Whereas my second opportunity was more of, hey, we got your information. Can you do something for us? And then finally, my last, the way I've been working recently is again through relationships where the person already is the music supervisor, and they're like, hey, I want to put together a song. Can you put together a team to compose that song? And let's just work on that tune till we get it, and that happens that way. So I guess my journey has been from not having any contact at all with, the film or the TV show, to medium level, which was like, we know about you. We may be talking to 5 other people. Hopefully you get it. Submit 3 songs if you can in 48 hours. And then the last one was, the last situation that I'm kind of in is when I literally get direct calls from 1 or 2 music supervisors that are interested in something, and they think maybe I'm the guy that can make it happen. So yeah.
Seems like, much like the rest of the music industry and the film industry, it's a lot of relationships, and it's who you know and keeping up with those contacts and stuff like that. That really seems key to success here. I'm also thinking about, obviously technology has evolved a lot over time and a lot recently. There have been a lot of rapid evolutions, a lot of new kinds of media consumption. TikTok uses music, things like that. Ashlye, can you talk a little bit about, what the current climate is like for music licensing and sync in, film, television, video games, all of that? And do you think, opportunities are growing or moving, or are there less opportunities? What's going on?
Well, I think there are a lot of opportunities. I think that, Blake and Lou can probably speak to this just as well, if not better than I can. But I, from my standpoint, I'm doing a lot of sync licensing. I just did one last week. For every documentary film that's produced, you need to sync license. I mean, YouTube, you're supposed to have a sync license. That's kind of a cluster, because most people don't know that, and the whole rights management is really wonky with YouTube, and yeah, so that's a different situation. I mean, there are obviously opportunities to earn income through that platform, but it is a little non-traditional, if you will. But yeah, I mean, with all the video games, I mean, one of the transactions I did 100 years ago, it feels like, was for the NBA All-Star game. And there were so many more games now, I mean, than there were. So, I mean, for every game that uses any music, I mean, there's 2 license generated, right? One for the composition and one for the recording. So, I mean, I think that given that so much content is available, online and, elsewhere, but online in particular, that of course there are a lot more opportunities. The question is, are people actually transacting like they're supposed to? So that's a different ball of wax.
Yeah, so you started kind of talking about deal structures and stuff like that. So I want to get into that a little bit more. What are the different kinds of rights one can or should have to license a song? There's, publishing, sync, master, all of that stuff. I'm not super familiar. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure. So every single time, an audiovisual project uses music, you have to, they have to license the composition, which is, the underlying work, the music and lyrics. And, they have to make sure that whoever, well, that the composition itself is actually owned by the folks that they're talking to. And that can be a challenge. And I'm sure Blake can speak to that. And if it is a challenge, you usually just don't want to deal with it. So it's important that the rights holders, be identifiable and be easy to work with. So they have to clear the composition, that's a sync license. And then they have to clear the recording. So you can't clear, if you don't, unless the composition is in the public domain, then you always have to clear the composition. There are exceptions to that, like if the part of a song that they're using is not original, but we're not going to take my law class today. Presumably you always have to clear the composition with little exception. And then you have to clear the recording. So you clear the composition first, and then you clear the recording because the recording embodies the composition. And sometimes the recording and the composition are owned by the same party, but I think more often is the case that they're not. So, if you are licensing someone's recording that's a cover, then you'd have to, the I Will Always Love You example is done to death, but it is a good one. So when, that was transacted, the first step was to contact Dolly's people, because Dolly Parton wrote I Will Always Love You. And then the clearance, whether it was the music supervisor or the clearance company like Evan Greenspan or whatever, is responsible for clearing the master, the sound recording, which was Whitney Houston's version. And that's called a master use synchronization license, but they're both synchronization licenses. In the industry, people refer to a sync license often as the publishing, the composition, the license for the composition, but the master use license is also a synchronization license. They're both sync licenses. But for those of you who don't know, sometimes that jargon can be a little bit confusing. But you need to clear both, even if the owner is the same for both the composition and the recording. You still have two licenses, though they can be combined into one.
Got it. Blake, did you have anything you wanted to
I don't know
add?
if it's a level of detail that's, maybe it's too much, but I mean, in fact, one of the strange things about licensing music for a film is you don't actually need the permission of the writer. We end up with two licenses, one for the master and one for the publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a distinction, it ends up, the writer of a piece of music, if it's used in a film, they will get royalties, but they don't get an actual deal. It's like a statutory arrangement where HBO, when they license something to put it in their show, they pay the publisher and they pay the master owner. And then the writer will get royalties through their BMI or ASCAP. And usually, if you write a piece of music, you control the publishing. And so the only reason you wouldn't control it is if you had sold it to someone else or you were writing under a publishing deal, which historically during the 20th century, that was the case most of the time, that most people writing music that ended up getting released or licensed or generating income, they did have some kind of publishing arrangement where they had sold those rights to someone else. So I don't know, that I hope that doesn't make it sound even more confusing.
And that's why I said rights holder, because it can be. Sometimes the writer does own the song, like you said, but
yeah.
But
I mean, typically in an independent environment like New Orleans, like what we were dealing with on Treme, we were always trying to, another TV show comes in and they're like, well, let's get some New Orleans music. What they like, have them play, Basin Street Blues, and we'll pay them to the musicians to come and play that, and then we'll get a sync license for that music. Well, we were always trying to use music that was written by the band or the musicians who were appearing on screen. So if you know, when Rebirth were going to be in a scene, I would always start with, okay, what tunes do you guys own? What tunes do you control that we can use in this scene? So rather than having you play Basin Street Blues, the money for the sync license on that is going to go to some corporation in Los Angeles that bought the rights from the people who bought the rights, who bought the rights, who bought the rights. Whereas if we use Feel Like Funkin' It Up, that money's going to go right to Phil and Keith and you know, the people who wrote the music. So yeah, in an independent environment, usually the people who wrote the music also recorded it and control it and pretty close to that and end up getting the money. But you know, when we started out on this journey, I mean, when I was working with David Simon on The Wire, part of what I was always interested in doing was, again, taking money from big corporations and giving it to musicians. So just from the very beginning of being a music supervisor, I thought, what a great thing to be able to do. It's like a Robin Hood kind of thing. And on The Wire, we ended up working with a lot of hip hop artists in Baltimore and did a similar thing where, you know, the music, it was great to do that because it was the music that was actually playing in those environments that we were trying to portray. So it was authentic. It was also, you know, a lot of artists who were only known locally and didn't really have national record deals. So it was great for them to have their music exposed. It was simpler and cheaper. It was simpler to go to one artist who had written and recorded a piece of music. Hip hop is notoriously difficult to license because there are many producers, often many writers, and historically a lot of hip hop uses samples, which it creates another whole problem. So it was kind of this great model we accidentally created by working with local music community. We're putting money in the pockets of musicians, we're helping the music community, and it's good for the show because you get good, unique music rather than just, you know, a lot of hip hop, if you watch TV from around that period, a lot of other shows, they're just using like library music that sounds like hip hop that's all made by, you know, a few guys in a studio in LA. And the idea that you would use that in a show like The Wire, you know, it's just better to use the real thing for all sorts of reasons. I forget how I got down that long rambling story, but
I think
what
just
were we talking about?
I think you made a good point though, Blake, because you know, Treme was in, as you're talking about The Wire, was in particularly Treme was a situation where, as you said earlier, you know, the music drove the show. And I can't tell you the number of times that either you or David or Eric or Lolis reached out to me wanting to know, you know, about, you know, who owned what rights to a certain song. And, you know, in the situation, and I'm not saying this is Rebirth, but there were so many situations where, you know, y'all wanted to use music that was co-authored, and the folks who wrote it didn't have an understanding about who the actual writers were. And so they'd come see me and we would work that out, you know, before the license was issued so that it was, you know, free and clear from any encumbrances. But that's kind of unusual. Most of the time you have to have that, you know, unless someone really wants your music, they don't have the patience for that sort of thing. But you all were very different because, you know, like you said, you know, that was the raison d'etre for the show. So
yeah, I just remembered the story I was thinking of from The Wire, which was that, you know, we were working on season 4 of The Wire, and it was around the time that Katrina was happening, and I had tried over the years to occasionally use some New Orleans music in The Wire, and David, who's a big New Orleans fan, was always like, you know, they're not listening to the Hot 8 brass band in the housing projects in Baltimore. It's just, I can't sell it. I would love to do that, but it doesn't feel real. So we're not going to do that. But there was a certain scene where we used some Deacon John, and it played. It was great. It was in a bar and everything. And we were like, look, this is great. Let's use Deacon John. Let's get him paid. And it went over to the HBO machine and everything, and we felt really good. We're like, oh, this is great. We use some Deacon John music, and he'll get paid and everything. And then in like 2 years later, I was on set in New Orleans, and there was Deacon John, and I was like, when I started talking to him, and I said, oh, you know, we used your music on The Wire partly because we loved the music and it was right for the scene, but we were also we loved the idea that we could get you paid. And he was like, what music on The Wire? And he had not only didn't get paid for that, but didn't even know it had happened, because again, it was some music that he didn't control. And so from that was one of the lessons I learned, like, don't just think that if you use this music or that music, that money is going to the artists. But, you know, so that was that we doubled down on our efforts to really try and pick music on Treme, really think about where the money was going. But this is, you know, I mean, I have to say, this information is not that useful if you're a musician in New Orleans trying to think about how can I get some money and how can I get my music into a film, because this is not the way the industry works. Music supervisors in general are not going around saying, how can I do the right thing, let alone how can I get musicians paid? They're just like anyone else. They're overworked, and you know, the path of least resistance is to go to this music library here and pick something that says New Orleans style R&B and like put that in and hope that it won't bump and no one will throw it out. And then, you know, I mean, that's just, so, I mean, I feel like, you know, when I asked to talk to people ask me also, how do I get to be a music supervisor? And my path of getting to be a music supervisor is so random and specific, and you can't follow that path to do that. It's hard to, I don't know of any path to become a music supervisor, just as I don't really know a path of how, I can't tell you guys a path of how to get your music into a TV show. I'm also a composer. I have a big catalog of music that I control. I would love to get it into a TV show, and it's hard for me in the same way it's hard for everyone else. There are some general things that I think about all the time, which are, you know, but then it almost starts to sound like a self-help book, or you know, like really cliched. But I do think one thing I think about a lot is to, you know, think about what are the specifics of your work that make it unique and specific, and emphasize those. Because I think a lot of the time people are thinking, how can I come up with something that sounds like these other things that I hear on TV? Well, the things that are already on TV, those bases are all covered. If you try and copy that, thinking that will help you get further along, I don't know that that's a good way to do that. I think it's much better to look at what you do specifically. What is it about you know, about your music that makes it specific? What is your area of expertise? What do you do really well that other people don't do? Lou was saying when he got a call about doing brass band music, that was in his wheelhouse, and he is an expert and can just come up with that right away. That's a great thing to focus on, and to try and, you know, figure out an area of expertise. Maybe your area of expertise is New Orleans music, and representing that to people in the outside world who need that.
Yeah.
Which then leads me, and I'm sorry, I'm just rambling on, but then I just have to say one other thing, which is, don't use AI for anything, ever. AI is evil crap. And it goes exactly against what I'm talking about. AI will help you make bland nonsense. And, you know, there might be business reasons or money reasons to use large language models and AI to do other things, like sort some like, you know, summarize a long piece of writing or something like that. But in terms of music, in terms of anything creative, like, why would you ask a bland piece of machinery to create something that you're then going to put your name on? You know, as far as I'm concerned, AI has no place in the creative process. Now, other people might be able to speak to it or come up with a reason, or say, from a business point of view, oh, I can write 100 songs in 10 minutes. Or some other reason for you know, capitalism or business reasons why it's useful. But in terms of creative work, I think AI has no place at all, and it will only take you in the wrong direction of trying to be successful on your own terms as a creative person, and in trying to be successful as an artist.
Lou, I saw you come off mute. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that agree with Blake, like the path. The trickiest thing about sync and licensing is that I don't know anybody that does it that has the same story to success. It's like always someone you knew that you kind of knew that maybe did, and they're like, hey, would you? And you're like, sure, give it a shot. In a similar way, somebody asked me to do sound design for a movie. I'd never done it before. I had the gear and I gave it a shot and I was good at it. So my name kind of got in the mix of that, even with my first sync and licensing thing. You know, the guy that introduced me produced, he was an audio engineer who mixed and mastered a song that was friends with an agent that I had at that time. So it's just, you can't duplicate it. I think the best thing for artists to do is, I'm going to start with the hard part that we hate. Make sure your paperwork is right. Like, make sure you understand your paperwork and all your paperwork is in the right place. And what I mean by that is mostly you're publishing your copyright, who the writers are, and what everything is. Because one thing I said early on is that every time I've been called, it's been quick turnarounds. It's like you have to go very quickly. And so make sure also that you have the versions. There's different types of versions of the songs you need to have ready for them. That's the first thing. So make sure all the technical and logistical things are ready. But besides that, you just have to really work on your craft. You know, you have to be ready to go at the drop of a hat. And when I would get the calls, if I had gigs or the studio sessions or whatever, I would have to cancel everything. I'd be like, hey, look, I need to push this back because, you know, Disney is offering me $75,000 to compose this song, or at least to try to get it, you know, and I have to compose it. And so it's like it was worth it. And I know one guy who named, you know, Jay Weigel, I think is one of the most popular people from New Orleans who's doing it, at least, you know, that you may or may not have access to. He says he just sits down and randomly writes stuff. You know, he'll just be like, I want to write horror stuff. And he'll sit down and he'll just write it. I want to write, you know, death metal stuff. And he'll just write 5 songs in that way. And so he has like banks of just music that he's written and composed that could be used in case anybody calls. He can literally just send them a link and say, hey, maybe you'll like some of these. It just depends on you as a musician and what you want to do. One of my mentees was really trying to get into this space. And if it's your direction for music and what you really want to do in music, yeah, spend the time, work, build a massive catalog. But most importantly, you have to get out and shake hands. You have to meet people. You have to, you know, go to the film fest, go to the any place you can mix and meet with people who are in film, and you have to meet them and talk to them. And if you're lucky, they'll give you a call. And music supervisors, Blake, you have to confirm this, they kind of hide. They won't tell a musician what they actually do because they know they're going to be like bombarded, you know? And so any music supervisor I've met, it's been like, they don't really reveal what they do immediately. And so that's kind of been my experience. And I'll say this, the more you work on your music, like one of the Disney situations I was asked to do, and I didn't know this artist at the time, we're close friends now, but they said, hey, we want a song that's similar to Pell. Now, if you guys know Pell, Pell is a rapper from New Orleans. I didn't know Pell. Had I known Pell, I'd just called Pell, like, let's put this tune together, you know, but they knew enough about Pell to be like, that was in the description of the music. Like, we want something that's in the style of what Pell would do. And So, and Pell's not thinking about music supervision. He's just writing music. He has great placements. He's been placed in several major films and commercials and stuff. But he's not even working with Pell. He does not think about getting the music, sync and license. He's just writing great music. That's what he's doing. He's writing great music and doing his best to make sure everybody hears the music, and then it happens that way. As far as my big warning is not about AI. My massive warning is about Splice, and I would just say, if you have any desire to be a artist or be in this space, I would say do not upload any of your stuff to that site. I can tell you right now, one of my artists is literally, his like not his likeness, but his music, 2 weeks ago was on one of the most popular animes right now going. They just pulled, literally made in Japan, translated into English, super popular anime that's like number 5. And of course, I get a call and it's like from a deal he made years ago with Splice, and they pulled his voice from that. And now he's on this anime, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's just gone. So, and they're making money off it. And it's some contract he signed with a local producer who, paid him probably $500, to do it. So that would be my warning to artists.
So can I speak real quick?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, from a transactional perspective, from an attorney's perspective, so there, to echo what Blake and Lou have been talking about, how everything is different, right? Like every sync is kind of it's structured a little bit differently. Well, not the contract, but there's variations in the contract. We'll get into that later, but the arrangement. So, obviously, Blake and I worked together. Treme, that was a very unusual situation because, Blake was trying to make sure that, like he said, he wanted, New Orleans artists who are rights holders to get paid. There's been situations. I have a good friend, my friend Chelsea High in Los Angeles, reaches out to me pretty often. Sometimes he'll want some bounce music. Sometimes he'll want, trad jazz music. And that happens every now and then. Sometimes, every now and then, well, actually pretty often, I'll get an email from the Evan Greenspan company, which is a huge sync clearance company. And I represent an artist who had a sample, like part of his song in LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out. And Ellen DeGeneres was a huge fan of LL Cool J. So every single time she played that song on her show when she was still on the air, which was a lot, I would just get an email from, some robot, right? And I would sign off that way. But when I did, I'll just try to make the story really quick because I think this speaks to what we're talking about. I mentioned that I represent this really, really huge music catalog, and I'm a lawyer, not a marketeer, but my client is a marketeer. And you all may or may not have heard of Boots Cosmetics, but it's the largest. It's like the largest cosmetic and drugstore in the entire United Kingdom. It still is. And in 2007, they reached out to my client who owns this catalog they wanted to do, they wanted a specific song. So sometimes people want specific songs and sometimes they don't. And they asked for a specific song, but they really were more into the sound, right? At the time, they wanted someone, they weren't from New Orleans. This catalog is largely New Orleans artists, but not all. And I asked my client, I said, well, people are struggling down here, obviously. The Mother-in-Law Lounge at the time was still underwater and had been recently, just the water had receded, and it was in major jeopardy. And I said, why don't you see if they will, accept an alternative to what they're proposing? And he came up with a song that Miss Antoinette Cato told me at the time when I was in the lounge she'd never even heard of. She said, that's not even on Ernie's jukebox. It was a song called Here Come the Girls. This is for a 1.5-minute holiday spot, which is very lucrative, especially with the, company like Boots, which was going to be and this is a 1.5-minute television commercial all over the United Kingdom. And so they liked the song. It was written by Alan Toussaint and recorded by Ernie Cato. And it became a huge hit. The point of it is that, while the sync, like looking for sync licenses is not a business model, a single transaction can be transformative. So this was like I said, a very, very expensive sync license, but it took off. It was like the people in the UK went batshit over it. And because of that, there was huge demand. We generated, I don't know, we created like something like 4 or 5 different compact disc compilations with not just that song, but a bunch of other New Orleans music on it. And that's when, British people were buying CDs like crazy at that point. And because of that, the next year when they wanted to license, the music for their next campaign, we kind of had them where we wanted them because they wanted that particular song because the country just went crazy over it. And we got to like up the ante. We asked for twice as much. And then it became so popular that not only were we generating more audio, but like Beyonce sampled this song. Not Beyonce, Sugar Babes sampled this song. It was licensed in Desperate Housewives. It was licensed in Payless Shoe Stores. It was licensed in like 5 different other advertisements and all over TV. And I think by the time, like within 5 years, this like unheard of New Orleans recording, first of all, it saved the Mother-in-Law Lounge, but we're talking millions of dollars. So, I mean, not many millions of dollars, but the point of it is that if you, get if you happen to have a situation where your song or your recording is in that kind of position, milk it, like really work it, because it can lead to other revenue streams down the line. That's all.
Something that I have always been curious about, and this conversation is making me think about right now is, as an artist, as a creative, how do you balance your creative control and making sure that you're still producing a product that you're proud of with making something that is commercial and something that you're trying to sell? And, Lou, I'm kind of curious on your perspective on this, and have there been times where you've been working on a project where you share something with them and they're like, oh, I like it, but we don't like this part. Can you tweak this? How does that make you feel? And yeah, just what's that balance like?
Oh yeah. Okay. So usually, and I'll speak directly about sync licensing first. I have never, well, I used to. Usually when they have a request for, we want this style of a song, the song that they pick is almost never what they describe. That's been my experience. It's always been like, we want a song that's kind of like this, but kind of like that, but kind of like this, but kind of like that. They always pick another song. So that taught me early on, like, okay, I have like, they'll send you, if you're in a certain level of it, they'll send you like the storyboard and kind of how it's going to flow and feel, and maybe a synopsis of what the show is about. I write to that. And if they don't like it, I'm just fine. I'm fine with it. But I have tried to cater, and then sometimes they'll send sample songs, like it should sound like this and it should sound like that. And then the trick for me is when you try to get it to sound like that, and you'll never, in my opinion, you'll never really get it. I kind of go off of what I think works. That's just the artist in me that does that. I mean, this is the music business. I mean, you're going to get your feelings hurt, or at least people are going to be brutally honest with you and tell you the truth about your art. And you'll find out quickly if this is something you want to do or not. But look, I get, every time you release any music, whether it's sync licensing or not, anytime you upload it or put it on a CD or show up on a stage to play, there's a, great percentage that people may not like it, but that's a part of the game of being in music. So I think that you just grow thick skin. So for me personally, it's important, but it's more internal, it's not external. It's I do take it very seriously, but I don't take it in an emotional way. I take it in a way like, oh, I agree with that. And if I agree with that, I'll adjust. But if I do not agree with it, I won't, because it's my art. So I'm gonna express myself the way I think I need to express, and that's just gonna be it. So yeah, that's all I can say about, I guess, negative feedback. And there's a difference between negative feedback and criticism. I'll say this: if someone likes the song and they're saying, we love this song, can you change this, or that? That doesn't bother me. That's kind of like, okay, you just need to get it to fit what you need. Let's just do that. Oh, can you change your lyric? Sure, no problem. That's easy stuff. It's it And I guess I should also add, it depends. It's like, if I'm specifically composing for them, I do my best not to put my own, I try not to attach to the song too tough. I'm like, okay, cool. It's a part of me, but let me not think, oh, this is something I'm going to use for my own personal expression. My job at this point in time is to help this music producer, this director, and this producer emote something or create a feeling. So if I'm creating from scratch for a specific reason, it's a different from if I have a song that I love, I've released, and then they want to change it. That's different. That's different for me. I have an artist, you guys will understand, I have a different relationship with that song, you know, and that's pretty much how I deal with it. But I also say I've had a lot of horrible submissions. A lot where they're just like, I think they wanted to burn down the building. Like, oh, well, who called this guy? And I think those tunes were the tunes that I was probably too much in my space as an artist, when I've created from scratch. And so, opposed to just delivering what the client really wanted, and that's important. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of what you said there, Lou, is right on. I think there's a big difference between syncs, which are for music that's already finished and is out there, and asking you to write some new music for them. And most of the time in the shows that I worked on as a music supervisor, we're really only dealing with music that is pre-existing. And the reason for that is that's why we're using the music, is because it's known. It's a song that when people hear it, they're like, oh yeah, I would hear that at the bar in so-and-so, But when you're being asked to write music that doesn't exist yet, create something specific, I mean, this is one of the things that musicians there are great, incredible musicians and artists who are so good at what they do, but they're terrible at writing something for someone else, because film is a collaborative medium. And when you make music for a film or a TV show, the music is just one part of it. And so, yeah, it needs to be a certain length. It needs to start here and stop there. And I mean, really, I've worked on projects where, really big, famous, well-known recording artists are absolutely terrible at collaborating, and it's a nightmare to work with them, because they're like, well, I'm Mr. Rockstar. Who are you going to tell me that the bridge should be shorter? And it's like, look, go and make your own music and make the bridge whatever length you want it to be, and that's what you're good at. But in this case, we need something with a bridge that's only 7 seconds long, and so you either want to do it or you don't. But it sounds like, Lou, you're really good at doing both of those different things, and at being able to collaborate, that is a key skill to be able to have your music be used in other things, whatever it is, theater, film, commercials. If you want your music to be in someone else's thing, you have to accept the fact that it's their vision. It's not your vision anymore. You're putting one piece of the pie in there, and they're the ones making the pie. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't, don't get involved with that stuff, because it can be heartbreaking when you make something that is. I mean, I work also as a composer. I do film scores, you know, and there's so many times where you make something and you're like, this is great, it's perfect, they're gonna love it, and then they're like, nah, you know, I don't really like saxophones. Can you just try something else? So you do have to have a thick skin, and you have to ideally work with people that you trust, and have a mutual respect there, and you have to be willing to collaborate and change things when you're asked to do that.
Well, and what I'll add to it, Blake saying, look, I didn't just wake up and was great at it. You know, I was fortunate in my first one. It was brass band. Nobody out of those 50 composers could do it. You know, I called the cats from the neighborhood. We set up in the room. It was raw. It was dirty. It was exactly what they were looking for. It was street. It was everything they were looking for. And that's what got me in the loop. But after that, I went through like a year of nothing being accepted. And they were like, oh, this is horrible. You know, what are you thinking? But that was me learning, like, you know, I need to figure out how to dial back and just deliver what they wanted. Another great point that I wanted to bring up is I want to stress again, relationships. Look, what I've learned about the music, about the film industry, is that they call the same people all the time. When you are delivering consistently, it's one less thing they have to really worry about. And they're like, I'm going to call my 3 guys or my guy that I know can deliver on this, and they'll call you all the time, every single time. So if you decide to get into real sync and licensing, you have to decide if you're going to make a commitment to maybe take your art out a little bit, or who you are, maybe it matches perfectly, and just deliver in a quick, timely manner. It's got to be quick. I'm going to stress, you got to move very quickly. Then you could have a relationship. As they move from film to film or project to project, they're probably going to call you first because you have that relationship. So it's you got to really take all of this into account, you know. And if you're hard to work with, as Blake said, they're going to be like, I don't have time for that because the producer and director on my neck, I need to go listen to 200 other songs and that all these other scenes to fill, and you're giving me static about something I'm trying to help you out with. So you need to think about that all the time.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think, you know, we've talked about it a couple of times today, but just the notion that we want to make it as easy as possible for the people we're working with to want to call us over and over again. Everyone's trying to, you know, do their jobs as quickly as possible these days, it seems like, and that's understandable. So building those relationships and making sure that you are reliable, you're not dropping the ball, so you get the phone call more than once. We have some really good questions in the chat. I want to get through a couple more questions before jumping over there, and then we'll wrap it up. So thinking about just really practical, actionable take-home knowledge. Say I'm an artist and I have this song that I think is really great and I want to try to get it licensed for whatever. What's the path? What first steps do I take? What kinds of deals should I be looking for? What should I do? I know there are multiple answers to this question, so feel free to, you know, kind of elaborate. But Ashlye, I'm gonna start with you on this.
Well, I mean, you should hope that someone wants to use your music. So, and that's, you know, something that Lou and like Blake are speaking to much better than me. But I can tell you from a contract perspective, you want to make sure, and I'll just repeat this, it's very important that you understand what you control from your music, because music supervisors have no incentive to work with you if you don't have all of your rights hammered out, because they don't want, you know, to risk exposure. They don't want to get fired for, you know, delivering a song that isn't actually owned by the right person. So you want to have all of your rights figured out. You want to make sure that you're registered with one of the performance rights organizations, because, you know, in my experience, that's important to most music supervisors. So whether it's BMI or ASCAP or CSAC, you know, be registered. When it comes to the actual contract, you know, sync contract is a pretty simple contract. I mean, generally speaking, I mean, you know, if it's, you know, if this isn't like a single use situation like the advertisement I was talking about earlier, if it's like when Blake was working with HBO or a bunch of other stuff that I've received, when you're dealing with movies and television, often is the case that you'll get a request for a sync license. It's just a simple sync request where, they stipulate, what part of the song they're going to use, however many seconds, what it's going to be synced to, whether it's the opening sequence or, in the body of the show or at the end. And typically it costs more to license music for the opening credits and the end credits, or for a climactic scene. Blake can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but that's been my experience. But you'll get a sync request, and sometimes they don't end up using it because the editing process doesn't allow for it, or they didn't change their mind. So just because you get a sync request doesn't mean they're actually going to use their music. But if they go to use your music, then you get the actual license. Now, what's important to know is that you need to pay attention to the type of use that you're permitting. So there are many companies that can afford an all-in sync license. So that would cover theatrical use, broadcast use, uh, film festivals are part of it. So for documentary films, so often is the case that this is more applicable, that I will depending on the budget. So documentary filmmakers often don't have the kind of budget to cover an all-in sync use or an all-in sync license, which covers like all the usages. So, what we'll do is we'll limit the use to film festivals only. And if it goes to stream, on Amazon or Netflix, or if it goes, to theaters, if it turns into a major film down the line, then those rights have to be renegotiated. And so if someone doesn't have the budget to license your music, that fits your demands, then you can limit the usages and renegotiate the terms if they end up doing well down the line. And there are big budget entities that just want a license for a certain use and not an all-in use. But just be aware of that. Most sync licenses do not cover soundtrack usages. That's a separate type of license. But I have seen a couple that do include that. They're not supposed to, and of course I don't go for that. But that's a different type of license. So just be aware of the type of usages that you're granting, so that you don't, so that whatever usage you are granting, like I said, is in line with the demand for what you're willing to take in consideration for their use of the song.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you're in a position where you're interested in having your music licensed and used, and someone's coming to you, if HBO is calling you and we want to send you a quote request, just say yes. I mean, and this is a strange thing for me to say, possibly, or it might be counterintuitive, but in this day and age, I've found that when I do see musicians being exploited, it's actually not as often by HBO or a big company as by middlemen and people actually closer to the ground. So there are producers who are working, they get musicians to come in the studio, just sign this thing and we're going to do a session. And you're like, and I'll give you $200 for the session. And they're like, oh, sure, $200, great. And that's kind of what happens with 5 years later, 10 years later, your thing is in an anime. Oh, it was actually this guy who you went and did that one session for. He's the one who screwed you. It's not actually the anime company, which is just someone in Japan licensing some music, thinking, oh, this sounds great, So there are these different points at which you can lose control over your work. But I think it's less often, when I was working as a music supervisor for HBO, if I was sending you a request, it was legit. And there also wasn't a lot of room for negotiation either, because I had a budget. I had to license 30 pieces of music for this show. And so, and actually on Treme, we did a thing that was, I mean, in retrospect, I thought it was kind of genius. And it was my idea when we were starting out with the whole thing. I was like, we're going to pay everyone the same. So every musician who comes to set and performs is going to get the same. Alan Toussaint is going to get the same as the guy who plays the tambourine on the corner of Frenchman Street. And, you know, and it's going to be a good payday. For the guy with the tambourine, it'll be a really good payday. For Alan Toussaint, not so much. But then we don't have to negotiate with every single person about how much they're going to get paid. And the same thing for the music licenses for all local music that was owned by the artists. We just said, okay, I think it was $8,000 for both sides, which again is a pretty good payday if you're in New Orleans and you've never licensed any music before. If the music was controlled by a bigger company, we couldn't get them to agree to that. But trying to create some standards across the thing. So again, there were situations where we went to people in New Orleans, local musicians, and we're like, well, we're going to pay you $8,000 for that thing. And they're like, well, we'll see about that. You're going to have to speak to my lawyer and my agent. I was like, well, okay, we can do that, but we only have $8,000 in the budget. Like, so, you know, really a lot of the time, bigger companies who are doing a ton of music licensing and have to do this on a daily basis, they're not trying to put little clauses in there to screw you over out of things. This is just their bread and butter. They're just doing business. That, you know, and so that's not to say you should just trust those people. Anytime you have to sign anything, you should have someone who knows what they're doing, look it over. Then that includes if your friend down the way asks you to come by and lay some tracks on something for $200. If they're asking you to sign something, you know, you need to know what you're signing, and don't sign things that seem weird or that you don't understand. Just don't sign them. Because probably if you go to the studio and someone's going to pay you $200 or $500 or whatever it is to perform, and they say, sign this thing. If you say, I actually need to look at this. Well, let's do the session, and, you know, I'll look it over and get it back to you on Monday. They're not going to send you away and say, no, you can't have this work right now. So anyway, that's my experience with those kind of things. What do you think about that, Lou?
I think you're 100% right. We talk about that a lot. You know, you should have paperwork between people you're doing work with, because I mean, Ashlye could talk all day about like the trouble you can get into and the issues. And I've already explained my situation with one of the artists that I managed with, you know, he just didn't think anything would happen with it. But you never know. I would say, I mean, to the question of how do you get your music into syncing and licensing, I mean, I don't think that there is a direct path. I think if you want to do that, I think you just have to go and make your song as big as possible. I think that's it. Bring it where, you know, how do you meet a supervisor? How do you do this? How do you do that? They get, you know, music supervisors get approached a lot. They're under a lot of pressure. A lot of different things happen. Just, you know, I'm going to keep going back to stressing, you just need to be the best artist that you can be. Now, if you're a producer and, you know, you're not on the stage and you're not the one singing, or you're just a composer, I shouldn't say just, you are a composer, and that's what you do, then go ahead and, you know, record as much music as possible and have it ready to go. And then find a way to move in that space. You know, I think it is about what Blake is saying too. Say yes. I mean, this was a full independent film. I think she paid me like maybe $500 for a 90-minute film to do sound design on a whole thing, which took 2 or 3 months. And it's just, I wanted to get my foot in the door, and that worked. You know, you know, if you go to, as Ashlye said, a documentary, they may not have any money. I ask questions like, hey, but what's your marketing plan? What's your intent? Is this just something that you're going to show once? I want to know, like, I want to balance my time. I'm going to be like, okay, is this something that's just like a passion project? Or do you have marketing dollars? I'll do it for free, but I need to know that there's some type of plan so that I can be seen and I can say, hey, here's my reference. This is what I've done. And when you talk to those to music supervisors, hey, this is the work I've done, and they know you're not green. So I think to really get into business of getting your music heard is number one. If you're an artist in you have a band, or you're a singer, or you're a producer, or performer, you're an actual performer, make your music as popular as possible. The second part is you know, like really have good conversations with people and make sure that you're going to have to cut some people some deals. People who are doing documentaries, they're usually financing that out of their pocket because of the thing Blake first said. As AI keeps getting fed, it's getting better and better and better. So my guy who used to call me all the time, like, hey, Lou, I do wedding videos. Can you do some original music that sounds like this? Sure, pay me a few dollars. We've known each other since we were 12. And, we go from there. And I'm just composing the music. Now he's like, I don't have to call because I'm with this program that has, 10,000 songs I can just download to get what I want. And I pay a monthly $19.99 a month. And it's stock. I forget, there's a few platforms, but every platform that does stock footage and stock images and music, and they all have now the music category so that you don't have to call a composer. So you need to also be thinking about how do you become a Danny Elfman if you want to do it, so that people are not only calling you for your music, but they're calling you because your brand associated with their project is actually going to help them. So you do have to start thinking in that kind of way too, because we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube with AI. It's getting smarter as people use it. So you want to think about building as quickly as possible.
I think one of the main misconceptions about, this whole category is everyone who gets a song licensed just, they put it on a catalog, they put it in a library, and there are just these music supervisors who are sitting there, listening to samples, and that's how they find music. And that's, really not the case a lot of the time. It goes back to the relationships, it goes back to, the brand, like you just said, Lou, that, this artist, this band, this musician already has that they want to work with, they want to be associated with. And I think that that's, really, really valuable and something that, yeah, like I said, is maybe a misconception. Blake, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, again, I don't know that my particular way of working and experience is applicable, but just to say, I don't think in 20 years of being a music supervisor and putting hundreds and hundreds of pieces of music into TV shows, I never once put a piece of music in a show that I got from a cold call. And I never once listened to a piece of music that was sent to me in a mass email. I never listened to it. If you're sending out mass emails to people saying, "Hi, I'm so and so. My music's great. It's perfect for your TV show," I'm not clicking on that shit. I'm hitting the spam button. And I mean, and that part of the reason for that is that it's like the way David Simon makes TV. It's supposed to be taking place in the real world. And the music that we want is pre-existing music that creates that world. So music that's made by an AI that sounds like a brass band in New Orleans, maybe, I mean, I feel sad for the people who would even put that shit on their wedding video, but we're certainly not putting that in a show that's about the culture of New Orleans. We want the music that really is part of that culture. And we're willing to pay for it. But that also means that you can't really send me a pitch, and because we know what that music is. We've lived our whole lives listening to all the brass bands and listening to all the shit and talking to the people who make it, and so if it just never happened that people would get in touch with us with something that we didn't know about, and that was perfect. I mean, it can happen, absolutely. It can happen with other music supervisors who don't have that kind of rigorous mandate to tell a story from an authentic perspective about a pre-existing world. Maybe you really do have some great jazz music that you make that would be perfect, and it doesn't matter that nobody's heard it before. But a lot of the time, People are looking for music that already has a life in the real world, which is why you're better served, as Lou was saying, making yourself into a musician with a reputation, then, because that is something that no AI can make. No AI is going to be a musician with a reputation who has a connection to other cultures and musical activity, those kind of things. The other thing I want to say is that I think I don't know, and maybe Lou, you would also have a feeling about this, but I think it's worth, as you make music, releasing it into the world, using a company like CD Baby or there's a few of them that will, and it doesn't cost very much money, but then your music is out in the world and available, and it gives it a different feeling than music which only exists on your hard drive on your computer. And people do go and listen to music on Spotify or Apple Music or the other services. Music supervisors will go there, and those algorithms will suggest stuff to them, and it's possible that they will hear something there, or that you also, it is a way to have other people find your music and listen to it. Bandcamp is also, really, really worth doing. My experience with a lot of artists in New Orleans is that they're only thinking about New Orleans. So people think, well, I'm going to go in the studio, I'm going to get the guys, we're going to go in the studio, we're going to record a new CD to sell at a jazz fest. And they don't even put that CD, they don't release it anywhere else, So they might take some CDs over to Louisiana Music Factory or down to Euclid, and so you can get their CD there, and you can buy it at Jazz Fest in the booth, and you can get it at their gig. But also put that thing in somewhere where it can be found in the world. If someone is Googling latest brass band from New Orleans, it's someone who doesn't know anything, they might find it if it's been put out in the world, if it's on YouTube. Now, also all of those services, DistroKid, CD Baby, you can have them make your music available to other licensing opportunities like YouTube and TikTok. And I don't know what those deals look like, but I would guess that they're at least legit. Like, if TikTok goes through them and uses your music on a thing, I'm sure the royalty rate is terrible, but it will be something.
So what I'll add to what Blake is saying is absolutely right. I think you do have to build yourself up as an artist and do it that way. There are several outlets to do it as an artist. Again, it's not a one-stop shop. I think Ashlye taught me this about your CD Babies and your TuneCores and places like that. Maybe Ashlye, she'll correct me. But be careful what you click on some of those, because you may end up in a publishing agreement with them, which is a little different, which is like, oh, I just thought I was putting my stuff into a catalog that would possibly, I think TuneCore does have like, well, hey, get your stuff in music and film, and you click the button and the small print basically said they become your publisher. And that could be weird, down the line. So just read your small print, everything like that. I will say this, another way, if you're really adamant about getting into it, is be unique, be massively unique. I know for a fact AI has not figured out how to do bounce yet. They is not figured out how to deal with the complexity of bounce music and rhythms. So that's something that's unique. They have to come to the source for that to figure that out. And that's why I'm like, don't put your stuff on Splice unless you want to be that type of producer who just sells Splice tracks. If that's what your thing is, fine, do it. And then lastly, Blake, what he said is like, I'm like this. If you're creating music, it's release it for the world to hear it, and find your people. There's enough music. There's enough there's enough pods in the world where you find your people. Almost every type of music has a group of 100,000 or even 5,000 people that would love it. And I think as an artist, you have to, composer, writer, producer, I don't care what you are, it's your job to make sure not only that you're creating, but that you're being seen. And you have to figure that part out. Gone are the days of A&R and people that help you become seen. There's too much competition. There's too much static in the industry. If you really want to, there's no shortcuts to it and no magical wands. You have to do the hard work, and you have to say, okay, now I've created it. how do I get people to acknowledge it? You know, and you have to do it. I'm sorry, I wish I knew, but as a working musician about to release an album at the end of the month, I'm in that process now. I'm like, every time, even with Billboard charting albums, every single time I have to like have a plan and I have to literally go to work every single time. There's not an artist around that does not care how big or small you are. They have to go to work every time they're done with their music and their art. And that's just, there's no shortcuts. So, and even if you do get picked up by a film and they pay you $8,000, maybe it pays your rent or mortgage for a little while, but that does not guarantee that you become a star tomorrow. You know, so guess what? Once the money's gone, you're back in the same position. You got to do the work, build a super solid foundation in this industry, and you can't avoid. I don't know. I personally do not know anybody who's moderately successful who has not just taken a step back and said, I'm going to build a foundation. The last thing I'm going to say, as a native of New Orleans, being born and raised, taught music here, I think I have a right to say it. In New Orleans, we only think about ourselves as performing musicians. The reason that that's the case, because in New Orleans, like unlike other cities I've lived in, we can actually make a living just performing our music. In other cities, no, you maybe get to play once every 2 months, 3 months, and it's a big show, and all your friends come to that show. So that's 3 times a year. In New Orleans is like, you know, you can play 2 times, 3 times a week, every night, depending on what you are. But what that does is that makes we're less interested in people buying our product because we make more money from performing. But what that does not do is create longevity in your career. And it's like, at some point in time, your body's going to start giving out. Maybe you have a family and your family wants time with you and all of these things. So I always stress to New Orleans musicians, or wherever you are, I know we have some people from New York, build the recording artist side of your music. And what I mean by that is your reputation of your music precedes the performance. So people hear it and they want to see you perform, opposed to people being like, I'm going to the performance, I really don't care about the music, you know? So that's a whole nother rabbit hole, but I think it's important that I say that almost every time I'm on one of these calls, when I know there's going to be a number of people from New Orleans. It's like, we've got to be better recording artists. And then I'm off my high horse with that. So, yeah.
Y'all are going to be amazing panelists for this. Thank you so much for the wisdom. Let's do some questions from the chat really quickly, and then, you know, if anyone has any other questions, throw them in there and we'll get to them if we can. So we have a question, yeah, which I was excited to see. Do we think that we could propose these issues in film credit incentives, utilizing not only proofs, but specific language and integrating local artists in film shows and games? This is something that I think about a lot. You know, I'll try to go through the SparkNotes version, but basically, you know, Louisiana did have some of the best state level tax incentives, tax credits for music. That is unfortunately no longer the case as of a few months ago. Thank you, current political climate. But yes, this is something that, you know, I think is the responsibility of my office, the Office of Nighttime Economy. We actually had some conversations with the film office and with the Ella Project a few months ago about, you know, what can we do from a city perspective to try to help facilitate more licensing from our local artists. You know, Lou, to your point, it's just not something that people think about a lot here, but it can be incredibly lucrative. So yeah, that is something that is on our minds for sure. And I saw you come off mute. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to say that's something that's been very aggressive in many conversations over the past several years to someone who's been very adamant about it, and he's with the Grammys. Reed Wick has been super adamant on the state level to say, hey, look, we have all the musicians, engineers, and producers here. There should be an incentive to force films that are filmed here to actually like hire locals, you know, hire locals. So I would just add to what Julia's saying is that there are initiatives, and I have heard that come up a lot. So people are thinking about that. So I would say yes.
100%. Yeah, Ashlye.
And just real quick, you know, I agree wholeheartedly, but it does take pressure, right? And so beyond Reed and Lou and Julia, if this is important to you all, then you have to, get in touch with the state. You have to get in touch with those people. And Julia or I can, or Lou can give you that information. But, we have to be our own best advocates, right? So, especially right now, because the people in charge are, it was bad enough before, but it's really bad now. So it's gonna require a lot more pressure from a lot more people, and not just a couple of special interest groups, but from all of you and more.
Yeah, music advocacy and coalition building is something that is so critical across the board in this industry, especially these days. And maybe we should do a whole session about that, actually. I would love to get on a soapbox and talk about how important it is for every single person to use their voice, to get down to City Hall here, to get to Baton Rouge, to write the emails, to do the coordinated campaigns. Anyway, I have a lot of feelings about that. But yes, we're working on it. Okay, next question. Are there any lawyers one would recommend for sync and licensing? And you walk through the different versions, it should be formatted. The Ella Project is the resource for that in New Orleans. Ashlye, is the authority on all of this stuff. So definitely reach out to the Ella Project for all, questions about this stuff, contract review, all of it. It used to be that you could research music supervisors and send music directly to them. Now they typically say they don't select unsolicited submissions, and it seems artists need representation from a publisher or sync agency. Many of them don't accept unsolicited submissions either. How can independent artists get their music in the hands/ears of supervisors? What apps, platforms, sites are best for getting music into databases? Definitely talked about some of this, but yeah, Lou, go for
So
it.
yeah, that's just yeah. I feel like you can't do anything in this music unsolicited. I mean, it's too much music, and that's one of the first lessons I learned. Like when I was super young in the '90s, I couldn't get a record deal. I couldn't talk to an A&R unless somebody introduced me. It's just that's why I'm like it's a who you know business. They just get a lot of information and a lot of they don't want to be overwhelmed, and then you don't know if you can trust the person. Like Blake said earlier, or is everything clear? Am I going to get sued? So there has to be a relationship that's involved. There's no way to get around unsolicited, them saying we don't take unsolicited music. You just got to hit the streets, get some friends, and like meet people, and then it's funny, you can stair step in it and it gets better. As far as the platforms and everything, and Ashlye, I really feel like you and I had this in-depth conversation like 8 years ago. And it's just be careful with platforms. There was at one time a lot of platforms that's like, hey, we'll get your music on this platform or in this film and we'll pitch it. And artists, they were uploading their music, and in the small print, it says that they can sell the rights to your music to a third party. And what was happening was they were collecting all of these catalogs or all of these people's publishing rights and never doing it. But what they were doing is later on, once they reach a certain plateau and number, then they could sell their percentage of your song to like a tech company and just get a check.
Right.
And so you want to be careful with that. I think it's old school. I think it's like, go to LinkedIn and maybe have a friend and don't talk about music, or, do all the natural things, and, how to meet somebody kind of conversations, be personable. And if they like you, they'll give you a shot. They'll give you a shot. Even if you mess up, they'll give you another shot. And that's kind of what happened with me. I told you I messed up on a bunch of licensing deals, but the people liked me, like, okay, Lou, I don't know what you were thinking, but here's another opportunity. So, you are your best selling point.
And yes, we did have that conversation, and you do have to be, very weary of working with third parties who represent your music. And for the love of God, if you ever have someone approach you about shopping your music, just come straight to me, because it's probably not real. It's probably, like Lou said, a wolf disguised as sheep that's trying to take your music from you and not represent it. So I won't get too far in the weeds on that, but just we're free. you can be in touch with us. You know, there are a few other lawyers in town that can do this sort of thing too, but if that's the barrier, please get in touch with us.
Yeah, I think it really is an unfortunate side effect of the lowering of the bar to how difficult it is to create recorded music. Like, 50 years ago, you couldn't record a record without going to a bunch of gatekeepers and having a certain amount of, it was very difficult to make a record. Now it's so easy to make a record, which is great because we can all make music. But that means that the whole market for musical product is flooded with so much stuff, and it's created a whole nother industry, a sort of predatory layer above that of people who really are trying to rip off musicians. And I mean, it's really unfortunate, but it's like, in the digital age, it's become so much easier to make music. It's also become so much easier to rip off musicians in another way. You can do it at scale by sitting at a computer somewhere, create a service and a website and get people to sign up. So like, if a deal looks too good to be true, it almost certainly is. And yeah, I mean, having relationships with real people in the real world, and I mean, that's where music's supposed to live, is in the real world, really.
How does one imagine digital currency playing its part in sync licensing and NIL structure, expanding artists' IP protection, or impacting it? Who wants to take that one? Not me.
So just for clarity, by digital currency, I would imagine you're talking like a Web3 thing. That's what I'm curious. The NLI part, I'm a little confused with. I don't know if you meant the NFT portion of it, and all of those things. So I would just need to have that clarity to answer that one. But I think that's a Web3 question. Yeah. So yeah, I think, yeah.
And that's just would be contractual. So I haven't seen that personally.
I have seen people in Web3, if that's what we're talking about. I have seen people like moving into that space to have more ownership and control of their IP and making more money with digital currency. It's something that I did look into when that was really hot in post-COVID or during COVID. It's nothing that I ever, me personally, found super lucrative. But it was fun while it lasted, so yeah.
How and where can independent musicians, producers, publishers get access to sync briefs? Blake, do you want to do that?
What? Sorry, get access to what?
Sync briefs?
Sync briefs.
Is that where it's kind of a list of what sync placements someone is looking for, what spots they need filled?
I don't know anything about that.
So I think they may be referring to what I was talking about, which is just, when someone's looking, they're trying to, I've been approached with like, we would like the song to sound like this, be like this, feel like this, that kind of vibe. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. You'd have to know somebody. Like I said, I've always been approached by either the music supervisor or someone, and it's super, super confidential. So you can't share it. You can't really give any of the information or anything. I think you just have to be in a situation. Maybe if you Google it, maybe it'll pop up. I don't know, maybe some ideas, but it's nothing really amazing. It's just like, we would like a song that sounds like Freebird, but in a hip hop style. And that's really how it is that simple. Yeah.
You just said they're confidential and everything. Somehow I got added to SyncCon membership community and I'm on their email list, and I'll get emails you probably can't see, but where they'll just send, you can't do that, where they'll send, kind of a list of different, like it'll say genre, indie, singer-songwriter, dream folk, vocal, male or female, use TV broadcast, length of use, full, where, yeah, and I don't know how I got on this list, but SyncCon membership community, maybe look into it, unless they have a bad rep. I don't know, Ashlye, you might know. Blake, did you want to add that? I see you're off mute.
I mean, I don't know. That sounds super fishy to me.
Me
but again, I don't work in that space where I'm like trying to get a lot of people to submit music. I'm chasing after one piece of music that's hard to get.
And
But you know, you were talking earlier about how just going and doing it is important. And I mean, again, I risk sounding like a self-help book or a TED talk or something, but like I think way better than going and Googling sync briefs and finding people who say they're going to present your music to someone else. Find some people you can work with. Go to the film program and talk to film students who are making films. Do some music for them for you know, a 6-pack of beer or for whatever. Like, get involved with situations where you can do things, where you can make music that is going to be used for something else. Make the music for a play, whatever it is. I know that in the community there are always opportunities, and I mean, I've seen it again and again that people do music for a student film. That person, that filmmaker, leaves school and ends up being a big director, and they take their people with them. I mean, finding a way to make music and with people and have your music be part of other works of art, dance, theater, film. Those things are going to always, you will learn these collaboration skills. You'll get perspective on your work. It's a lot different than sitting in a room on your own with some machines making some music, or even sitting in a room and just making music. You know, if you find opportunities to go out and get your music into the world in different ways, that's going to create possibilities for growth and for other opportunities, which eventually that becomes a career. When I was starting out, I did film scores for student films for free, and that was how I learned to do that. And then eventually, yeah, some other students had a film and they had $1,000 that they would spend, and I got $1,000 to write 90 minutes of music. And then, you know, it just, you build from there. But and some of that, I don't think you can jump over those things. You know, you have to do that. You have to build from nothing to something.
Next question. Blake mentioned having a database or catalog earlier from scratch. How did the music make it into that database or catalog?
Okay, so all I'm talking about is whenever you make some music, keep track of it. Keep track of what you've made. When you record some music, you should have, if you're a musician who's consistently creating and recording music, even if you're just doing it in GarageBand on your computer, if it's of any worth whatsoever, give it a name, call it something, and start building a library, and have just a spreadsheet with the title of the music, who played on it, maybe some other things, the tempo, you know, all the information about that music. And if you do that consistently, I bring this up because doing it later gets to be really tedious and complicated. I am right now, I realize that like I haven't, I control a lot of music. I've written a lot of music. It's been a lot of films and stuff, and I don't have it all organized. And I have a project. It's going to take me like a year to make that database for my own music, because there's a consulting service who will take your catalog and make sure it is in all of the places it needs to be. It's on SoundScan. It's all on, you know, that you're collecting your performance royalties from Europe, all those things. But in order to do that, you have to tell them, here are the 10 pieces of music I own and control, or the 100 or the 1,000 or whatever it is. But so if you're just beginning this process of recording and writing and making music and thinking about how it can be used in the world, be organized. Like Lou was saying, you know, organize your shit, keep track of it, because it seems like, oh, well, I remember what that is. But like I find music all the time on hard drives that I forgot that I made. You know, 20 years ago, someone asked me to do something, I recorded it. Oh, and here it is. Oh, it's pretty good, actually. That can go in a library of music that I could send if someone needs music. So, yeah.
We have another similar question from Rosemary that also asks, do I need a website in addition to releasing music? Which I think you should have something public facing, but you don't need one. Lou's shaking his head.
Yeah, just go to Bandcamp. You know, it's the safest, most secure place. I mean, it depends on what you want to do. If you want a bunch of people to hear it and engage with it, and that way, yeah, you may want to go through a CD Baby or a TuneCore or something like that to get it on the DSPs. But if you just want somewhere digital to house your music, go to Bandcamp. And if you want it super private, go to Disco. Disco allows you to upload all your music and put it into your own playlist, and you can share that with people as needed. Bandcamp is public, like people can hear your music, but it's not something, and they can stream it. And they can do the same thing on Disco. The difference with Disco is that it can be completely private. With Bandcamp, it's more, they're really artist friendly, and they're kind of like super fans of music go to Bandcamp to find new artists. There aren't any playlists that are randomly pulling songs and putting your music everywhere. So I gave you three. Either you can go the traditional route through a TuneCore, Spotify, which is maximum exposure, but also maximum BS. Or you can go Bandcamp, which is like really for artists' favorite kind of thing, like where artists go and super music lovers. Or you can go completely private, where it's just you're cataloging all of your stuff, but it's placed somewhere digitally. And that's simply Disco. And then if you really want to be basic, and I use this for rehearsals and for shows, you just set up a Google Drive, set up a Google Drive, put your music in Google Drive, label it, and it's there. As you get more music, you'll have to pay a little more, but at least your music's on a drive somewhere that can be internet accessed, and hopefully you're backing up all of your music on some hardware as well, just in case, because again, all those things can go away. So that's important too.
Tyler asks, if you are hired to write a soundtrack from scratch, are you still responsible for registering the copyright and registering the music with a PRO, Performing Rights Organization? Ashlye.
If you own the score, then and you want to register it for copyright, then yes, you need to do that. And to Blake and Lou's points, you'll need to make sure that even more important than registering with the Copyright Office, again, it is absolutely critical that you're registered with the performance rights organizations, whether it's BMI, CSAC, or ASCAP if you're a songwriter, but also Sound Exchange, for recording artists and performers. Also for songwriters, Mechanical Licensing Collective, and anywhere else that is generating revenue, because if not, then you're just missing out on money. So, and it's also, it's just dumb. So just make sure that, you catalog everything and you keep track of everything, and you keep track of, new organizations that, the Mechanical Licensing Collective didn't exist in five years ago. Well, I guess it did. 10 years ago, it didn't. So, and it's collecting,
I'm just learning about it right now. Let me write that one down.
You don't know about it? Well, you're missing out on royalties, Blake. They collect mechanicals from streaming services like Spotify.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'm on it.
do it. It takes like 5 minutes. And they use song files. So anyway, just make sure, and if you're recording music, make sure that you have all your metadata together. So it's easy for people to, identify your works and like who the rights holder is. It's just seems like no brainer, but a lot of people don't do that. You need your ISB, your ISRC codes, and all of the metadata that is required for people who want to pay you to be able to identify you, right? You make it easy for people to pay you, not hard, because if you make it hard, they're not going to do it, and I don't blame them.
Ashlye, can you use MLC if you already are on CD Baby?
Yes.
Yes. All right, one more question and then we're gonna close it out. And I love this question. What should we be asking current candidates for mayor, city council, senate, and house, etc. right now? Which bills or policies support with a $sign musicians and composers benefits in Louisiana? Ashlye, I'm gonna hand that to you since y'all have been doing great work questioning candidates.
There have been several bills that have been proposed over the last couple of terms, but I don't think there's anything that's live right now with the state. With the mayoral candidates, city council candidates, you need to, first of all, you need to make the demands that you want, right? I would ask them for incentives, like for any incentives that make it easier for you to earn wages, whether it's, incentives, tax incentives for live music, for more live music for small or any venues, that promotes live music, whether it's, tax incentives, to speaking to the, what we were talking about earlier for the creation of content, that to definitely, get out of the way, not to overregulate music, not to, I mean, for the love of God, not to start arresting people for violating the noise ordinance, that sort of thing, to, figure out ways to, you know, to figure out the best ways to align resources to you all, because, there's money, whether the money's going to the right hands. I mean, that's something that, we can talk about in greater length, at our next session, where we're going to talk about advocacy, but really, like, identify the resources that you need to, maintain your livelihoods here, because it's hard. It's hard for everyone right now, but especially the creative community. And so, I mean, it could be affordable housing, uh, initiatives. I mean, there's a broad spectrum of things that you can be asking for, but just ask for it, and make sure it's intelligible, like it's easy to relate to and understand, and, do research and see if there's other, cities or communities or regions, whether it's in the US or beyond, that are implementing, programs or, allocating resources that you need, and talk to us, because we're pretty good at this. We've been doing it for years. I mean, we're not we don't know everything, but this is definitely in our lane, and I'm happy to talk to any of you, want to talk to all of you about this. So, just engage and convene, and make reasonable demands. If you start making unreasonable demands, people aren't going to pay attention. So
there's such a big spectrum of, things, like, for example, the music census sessions that we're all on right now are paid for by the city of New Orleans. But there are things all the way up to, those tax credits, incentives, things like that, all kinds of things in between. That goes back to the coalition building that I was talking about earlier too, though, what Ashlye was kind of mentioning, where it's a lot better to communicate something to people in City Hall if all of your voices are united. They respond a lot better to a big voice that has, a name on it versus just a bunch of tiny voices, even if they're all asking for the same thing. So, like Ashlye said, reach out to her. You can reach out to my office. I also love talking about this stuff. Our office is in the final stages of kind of putting together a pretty basic, straightforward local music industry strategic plan, which has a lot of different items, and they're all things from, of course, we're talking about affordable housing for creatives. We're also talking about support for venues. We're talking about support for, the brick and mortar recording studios, rehearsal spaces that our city is lacking, things like that. So follow the Yellow Project on social media, follow us on social media. There will be calls to action that come up, whether that's showing up at a city council meeting, sending an email to your council person, the next mayor, things like that. Lou, I saw you unmuted at one point.
Just real quick, I forgot to say, you should, if you like this programming, you should ask for the next mayor to keep the Office of Nighttime Economy, because, they've already done so much for the music community, including offering this professional development, they have this sound tax abatement incentive program, they parking solutions, and they're convening regularly with folks. So, and I think it's really important. And if you agree, then that is a big ask, and that takes care of a lot of the other issues that I was talking about, because like Julia said, they have a comprehensive plan to address a lot of the issues that I brought up just a few minutes ago. So
yeah, so this is from Jocelyn, who I know, J Money. What's up, Jocelyn? Yeah, I mean, I've seen, Jocelyn, and you probably noticed, there's been a lot of initiatives that have been on the ground that have, on a state level as well, that have been shot down, that have been great initiatives. So I do think, the time I've been back in New Orleans, there've been a lot of people that have been trying to figure out, how do we actually, from a state and city level, how do we convince the people in play that these are actually viable people for the community and a part of our ecosystem, and it's super important. And I've seen a lot of people pushing for that. I haven't truly felt a ton of it. Big shout out to Julia and to Ashlye. They have been definitely huge supporters of this movement. And even in areas without getting political, the current administration, they have shown up in places, that I've never seen before. So I would say that anytime I think about this or talk about this, I also lean into musicians a little bit, and just say that I think the voice and the direction of New Orleans music, again, I've been playing music since I was in my early teens, professionally, and it's chaos in the musical community, speaking from a musician's point of view, and that there isn't a voice, there isn't a line, we can't, as musicians, we don't even have our thoughts together on what we need, and there's a lot of anarchy there. So I would just say, as a community, I think musicians, we have to, and people that work in the industry, we have to get our thoughts together and just put together and stand by what we need, and everybody agree, and unfortunately be somewhat political about it. Be like, I'm not going to get everything I want personally, but I see how this kicks the can, in the direction that I want to go in, and music is. And I just think that we're all over the place. There's a lot of infighting, and there's a lot of us, and I call it small pond mentality, where it's like we're all fighting in this, as big as New Orleans is around the world. Most musicians have beat their head against the ceiling of New Orleans as well, because it is still a small community. So I would say that in order for us to be really present in the things that I would like to see done, like I would like to see us take on some policies that some European countries have, like a France, like a Amsterdam, where they're actually like services, like you want to tour the world, we have a fund for that. You want to do this, we have a fund for that. And they really support, oh, you need healthcare, oh, you want to perform in this venue, this is how much you're going to get paid no matter what. But that's going to take, from what Ashlye said earlier, is that's going to take the people on the street and the musicians, the people who do it day to day, to apply pressure and to actually understand our united and political power to get those things done. So that's all I'll say on that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was a long one, and I know I learned a lot. We could keep talking. Well, I could keep talking about this advocacy policy stuff for many more hours. But Jean, Ashlye, let's plan one for the next block. And speaking of the next block, we will probably be hosting those in December. And then, like Ashlye said, if you want to see this series continue next year, there will be opportunities for you to reach out to the next mayor to make sure that our office still exists, that these opportunities still exist, and that this is incorporated into the city's broader plan for supporting the local music ecosystem. So thank you so much to our panelists. This was great. Y'all crushed it. Thank you so much to all of our attendees. This will be available on YouTube and on the NOLA Music Census Sessions website if you want to come back and watch it all again. Thanks so much, everybody.